Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cosmere Connections. We're a bunch of book-loving nerds trying to find the secret of Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere as we reread the entirety of its story from Book 1 to Book 16 billion. Today, we are joined by Swiggity Swoo.
I'm just a humble terrorist steward.
We've got John.
I match now.
Kay's here, too.
Hello.
And I'm ReaderWarrior. And today, we are going to be talking about Mistborn, the Well of Ascension, Part 2. I'm forgetting the name of the part. Chapters 12 through 17.
So, Ghosts in the Mist.
In the Mist.
I really got to start having that out.
Wasn't the forgetting of.
It wasn't the forgetting of. It's going to be our tagline from now on. But we've got a lot to get through. We're going to try to speed through these summaries, so we're just going to jump straight into it. Okay? So, Chapter 12. The epilogue, we learn a few more names for the Hero of Ages, Rabzine of Klenium, and the Anamester. Anamnester. I am not
Anamester, I think, is how it's pronounced in the audiobook.
Sure, works for me. Marsh and Sazed arrive at the conventicle. Sazed uses Tim to zoom in and see if he doesn't see anyone, and Marsh says that they have all gone north toward Luthadel and up. If they go to the elevator, Marsh explains that it needs to be operated by people on the bottom of the crater, and he throws a lever and the cage/basket crashes down. Marsh then uses a rope to rappel down. Sazed takes off his 4 core copper mines, reverently hiding them behind a rock, and puts on 2 ankle bracers, 1 iron and 1 pewter, warrior metal mines. He then puts on a tin and copper ring. Sazed mentally comments how storing copper mines is how it works, and that he doesn't remember much without tapping them. Sazed throws his bag to Marsh, who pulls it to him and shoulders it. Sazed then jumps and stores iron and weight, somehow making gravity's pull on him less strong. Sazed floats/squirrel suits down and uses a bit of pewter to absorb the impact of landing. The mists appear as he waits for Marsh and briefly worries about them choking him. When Marsh lands, Sazed compares Allomancy's violence to Feruchemy's mental awareness and abilities. They reach a large door and both use pewter to open them. Marsh goes in to get Sazed a light because he cannot see unless there is one. They enter and Sazed starts storing the events.
I would also like
ring.
to point out real quick is that this is the first time that we've seen the use of a tin mines and the iron mines.
I was going to comment, this is our first chapter where we actually see firsthand metal mines being used. We saw Vince reacting to a pewter mine back in Final Empire when they were captured, but this is our first time seeing it all work.
No, earlier we saw him use a copper mine and a pewter mine.
But we never had direct confirmation like he was actually doing that.
No, yes, earlier this book.
Oh, what am I saying? Yeah, you're right. But here we're getting a lot of Feruchemy.
Yes.
We're getting a lot of Feruchemy this chapter.
Yeah, and I will say when he was decreasing when he was filling his metal mind to slow his fall, I think it was a line about how the wind resistance was what was keeping him from falling to his death there. Like it acted on him stronger because of his decreased weight.
That's why I said squirrel suits down.
Yep, like in a Mario game.
Sazed notes the size of the rooms and steel walls and the patterns buffed into them. Even the Inquisitor's society and religion is valuable to Sazed. And I find it really funny that Sanderson turned show not tell on its head into a literal Luthadelian structure there is until they find the dead servants, dead meaning murdered and servants meaning slaves. Sazed turns away, sickened. Marsh says he's going to the Inquisitor's bedroom alone and that Sazed should not follow him. Sazed goes down a different path and finds a torture chamber with spikes of different metals. Sazed's wonder why there weren't more Inquisitors and how they were made, but he doesn't really want to know. Sazed leaves and heads down once more, finding the last room. This one has a slab with terrace words carved into it. Very familiar words from Chapter 1, the epigraph. These words I carve into steel because anything not encased in metal cannot be trusted. As Sazed reads it, Marsh returns, commenting that the trip was a waste. Sazed disagrees and starts copying the slab with his copper mind and rubbing. There we go.
Within the torture room, the only torture implements that he sees are metal spikes.
And wooden melons. Yep.
That look like Inquisitor spikes. Also,
Yeah.
I thought it was cool about the plaques with in like the engravings and stuff. The metal plaques with the engravings as like the artwork on the walls, because it's something that the Inquisitors could actually see. As we know from what we have seen from the Inquisitor's point of view from Book 1 at the very end, we know that Inquisitors see the metal in everything. They don't see the world the same way that everyone else does. They see the metal lines, like the iron lines, the steel lines, pointing to everything and kind of outlining everything. And so I thought that was an interesting way to, like, for an Inquisitor to be able to actually see that depth and that change within the patterns for the metal, for them to use in their own headquarters as cool. Like the wall art or the wall decorations. Yeah, because why would they need windows? Why do they need light? Like we see with Marsh.
Because
Marsh just walks straight in. He doesn't. He doesn't need a light. He's like, why do you need a light? You
yeah.
Can't you just see with your spike eyes? But I do relate. Sorry.
It always has bothered me a little bit that the Inquisitors don't seem to be able to read the things that are etched in the metal. If they see the outlines of the metal, they should see where this surface changes.
They can see what's written in metal. The Inquisitors can read what's written in metal.
And why does this question might be a spoiler? I'll save it.
The Inquisitors can see what is written in metal. They can see that writing because they can see the patterns and stuff.
Right.
This entire place is basically here's for an Inquisitor to be at, and that's why everything's covered in metal, and there's really no homely touch to it because an Inquisitor isn't gonna need tapestries or glass windows, stained glass windows.
Incur my line of questioning without in spoils. So we'll just have to
come back to
it.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that.
Put a spike
I know
in
what you mean.
Yeah, right.
True. So I'm kind of, first of all, why doesn't Marsh just drop a coin down and jump down the crater? Why does he decide to rappel down?
Interesting question.
I hadn't really considered it, but maybe it's because he is an Inquisitor now, and that's a subtle way of showing that, he's kind of comfortable with this environment, and he's used the elevator before, probably multiple times.
So it might also be that Marsh is still not necessarily used to using his pushing and pulling powers. So instead opts for the physical climbing down of it that he would have used as before he became an Inquisitor.
Possibly, but Sazed also throws his bag at him and he pulls it to him. I don't know. Maybe Sanderson just forgot that his one character is that strong. Yeah.
I don't know. I like the detail, though. Maybe it's similar to when Sazed buried that body earlier. It's just the act of doing it.
Yeah, it could be that he doesn't, have full capability or trust in himself to able to do such a maneuver. But it's been a year. I think you would be, practicing a little bit with that. Yeah. Okay. My other question was Feruchemy steel. How the heck does that work? To be able to
Iron?
store weight.
Iron?
Iron. I don't know why I said steel. Steel's my favorite.
Yeah,
But
it seems really interesting because, as he said, it's like there are theories about it not actually storing weight, but storing your connection to the ground, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, there's a conversation in another book about that I'm recalling that I'm not going to really bring up because it would be a spoiler, but I think they were talking about that, like when you store your weight and it keeps you from falling, is the earth pulling on you less, or are you like pulling on it less?
Well, it would both ish.
There's a little
reduces the connection between you and the earth.
or the Scadrial.
Well,
I guess we should say
the planet.
Yeah.
Well, I think they refer to it as like the Earth.
I don't want people getting confused and think this is like a dystopian future and that this is Earth in a couple hundred years.
Yeah, no, this is a different planet. It's called Scadrial. It's not Earth.
Yeah.
I don't know if the ash falling from the sky was,
tied to that but that's about all of my main notes from this, my non-spoiler notes. I really liked how we got to see a lot of Feruchemy, and that Sazed has 4 core metal mines, 2 on each arm, 1 for his wrist and 1 for his forearm of copper mines, religions, knowledge that he keeps, but his warrior metal mines are like just ankle bracelets.
Yeah. So the copper mind does say that iron changes your mass, but it does not change the effect of gravity. So it doesn't modify weight directly.
That makes more sense.
Yeah. So it changes your mass.
I don't know enough about physics to grasp how that would affect your trajectory in flight.
I don't either. But
the thing is, 9.8 meters per second squared. We saw from.
Yeah. But if you weigh, it's basically wind resistance. The less you weigh, the more of your energy that it takes to push the air out of the way to go down. That's why a feather, which weighs so very little but has such surface area, drifts down in an atmosphere versus, say, a rock or a bowling ball or something of equal mass but only the size of a pinhead.
So, a glass ball and a rock ball, if they were both engulfed into a sphere, would fall at the same amount of time. But if you had like a glass pane, it would fall slower, assuming like it kept at horizontally.
Yeah.
Essentially, yes. The thinner that glass gets, the more it's going to be met with air resistance. What really is affected by it is terminal velocity. which is the maximum rate at which you can fall through a given medium.
Mhm.
So the terminal velocity of something like a balloon is much lower than a bowling ball of equal volume because there's more mass there that can push the air out of the way.
Okay. You're the expert.
I would not claim that ever, but I have a little bit of working knowledge here, so hopefully I've got the basics right. People will tell us if we don't.
Yes, please tell us.
Yeah.
How does mass work?
Yeah.
Tell us
After
anything.
high school, you don't really need it all that much.
None of us
Mass-
are physicists.
Unless you apparently do a Cosmere podcast.
Mass is the amount of physical matter. Weight is how much gravity affects that amount of physical matter.
Mm.
Density is how much space that same amount of physical matter takes up.
So, and this is going to be a tangent, we can easily move on. When a Mistborn then, for example, pushes on a coin, are they throwing their weight against it, or are they throwing their mass against it?
Mass. Gravity's
So
not
if-
involved in it.
So
Yeah.
if somehow you have a Mistborn on Venus who's got an increased mass, and they were pushing against somebody who was on Earth, because Scadrial is basically the same.
Yeah, and you
Size
picked the wrong
of Earth.
planet because Venus is basically the same size as Earth as well.
Neptune, no.
Mars.
You're right,
Mars
you're
has
Mars.
Mars is smaller, it has less mass, you weigh less. You could even
So
say the
if-
moon.
True. So on the moon, and the same Mistborn, they have the same weight. Would then the one on the moon have a weaker push?
Only if they were pushing with gravity in that same direction. Because then they'd be pushing. Actually, oh shit. I have
Okay,
to
let's
process
just
this.
let's
We'll move
let's
on.
yeah, let's curb that and not have to think about the ramifications of two Mistborns having a shoving match over
You
two
know that's
celestial
going to be how
bodies.
Era 3 works, though, right? Like, it's going to be people pushing on spacecraft and stuff.
Okay.
That
Anything
throws
else for
everything out the
chapter
window.
12?
I like some of Sazed's lines about religion in this chapter. He said, "It isn't a matter of worthiness, Marsh. Knowledge of all religion is valuable. I must make certain these things persist." I just love his dedication to religion and keeping that in his copper minds and passing it on.
Mhm.
It's like one of my favorite things of his character, and it's really cool that it comes out in this chapter.
Anything else for 12?
No.
Nope. Okay, then Swiggity, you've got 13.
Yes, I do. So in chapter 13, Vin is talking to Orsur, and she asks if the mists are coming sooner, and he seems to not really think so. She's kind of like disappointed in his lack of inquisitiveness, and she misses Sazed. At this point, she's still trying to figure out who the imposter is, so she asks Orsur if she can tell him anything about conjures, because that'll help her rule out which one of them might be a conjurer in disguise. But he doesn't want to talk about it. He's like, I'll tell you if you command me. And she's like, well, maybe it's a rogue conjurer who doesn't follow the contract. And he says, there's no such thing as a rogue conjurer. We all follow the contract. Then she proceeds to eliminate Breeze and Elend because Breeze showed up kind of after the fact, and she spent time with him up until they found the bones. And she was with Elend all morning. Then she asks if she can spot the conjure with allomancy, and Orsur again says these are things we don't speak of with outsiders. And then they have this kind of cute exchange where it seems like part of being a conjurer is you really get into the role you play, and he's disappointed that at this point he's just a dog, and he doesn't have like a role to play.
He doesn't
that
have
was
a
like a cool little
script.
detail about their society. And he says that they can't be affected by emotional allomancy. Conjure can't use allomancy either. That's another thing we learn. And Vin says that there was a reason Conjure needed to be kept away from Inquisitors and the Lord Ruler, Like, that's what Kelsier used to say. And so she asks him why that was. And at this point, he pretty much refuses to say, which is the first time he's been very adamant, like, no, there are certain things about conjurers that we, like, really can't let outsiders know. Later on, Vin is, like, worried about the deepness, and she feels like she's maybe the only person who cares about it, and she's wondering if it's, like, even anything to be worried about. She actually hears the pulsing, and she tracks it down, and she's watching this thing, and she's thinking about how, like, Kelsier said, oh, Mithrace can't hurt you, but this thing is freaking her out, and all of a sudden it grabs her, and she gets, like, really cold, and it says a pain shoots through her head, moving as if from her ear into her mind. And she falls out of the windowsill and, like, passes out. And Orsher shows up and tries to help her. And she's like, I'm fine, don't worry about it. And that's kind of the end of that. So this is an interesting section because she's battling with, like, the fact that the mists have always been her sense of freedom. And now there's this entity that she can't explain that's taking that freedom away and turning into a thing of fear. And it kind of goes along with this idea that she's still figuring out who she is, and, like, even this one place that she had where she feels this connection to Kelsier is kind of twisted now.
I like how even kind of Orsier seems to kind of reflect that, and how he seems to act like Vin used to. He's like, what do you want me to do? How would you like to use me? What do you want me to say? And how Vin has to basically confront herself and how she used to be. And that's why she does the whole, what are you afraid of? What do you like thing.
And he doesn't want to answer. And then she says, well, I love the mists. And she hates being afraid.
Mhm.
I think it's kind of similar to, I think, what she saw, like, Kelsier doing with her, like, trying to get her to, like, open up and, like, start talking about herself and, like, things as well. Probably.
Mhm.
It makes you think about the relationship between conjure and people. A little bit, right? Like, how do these conjure feel about this contract, especially now that the Lord Ruler is gone?
I love that the contract is a physical thing. And he's like, this is all in my contract. And he's like, I have to take a look at that again.
Should I move on?
Yep.
So the next part of the chapter is an Elend POV, where he's organizing a meeting with the old crew. Oh yeah, Elend!
Yeah!
So he's kind of like, he's dropping off a bunch of books, and he's worried, like, oh, I have no idea how they're going to react. And it turns out they kind of already had a plan before he got there. They were talking amongst themselves. And their plan is to basically make a deal with either Set or Straff. And they eventually land on probably going with Set. Elend is, like, pretty unsatisfied with this because he's considering that as losing. And he's going to feel guilty if the Scar are treated poorly by Set. And they didn't overthrow the Lord Ruler just to give it up to somebody else. So he tells them that his idea is to cut off the supply lines to the armies so that they get more desperate, which they think might be harder than he is imagining. And then he wants to basically try to play the armies off of each other. And at first they're like, I don't know if it's going to work, it's going to take a lot of charisma. And he kind of gets them to agree with it based on the idea that it's, like, something Kelsier would have thought of. And, like, it's got style. And this is the survivor's crew, Are we really just going to hand the city over that we won from God? And then some messenger comes in and says, hey, this woman was eavesdropping. and she's really tall. And it turns out she's a feruchemist, and she asks to speak to Elend alone. And at first he's like, I don't know if that's such a good idea, you know, but she says, oh, you can just have Vin come in and deal with me if that's such a problem. So he's like, okay, whatever. I guess that's true. So he sends everybody out of the room, and the chapter ends with him about to talk to this terrace woman.
There was a lot of really funny bits in this chapter I really enjoyed. Like, from the
That
start,
meeting.
like you were late, he's like, there were books involved. Or how they're commenting, like, Kelsier had the most horrible handwriting. It wasn't horrible, it was distinctive.
He's like, oh, great. Even Kelsier's handwriting was legendary.
Uh-huh.
Well, and they're talking about how they kind of missed the chalkboard. They're like, that chalkboard was crap.
Yeah, I love this part. It was like that crew planning scene from the Final Empire all over again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even more so when Breeze has Spook go get his wine, and Spook is like,
yes. Spook just sighs and go gets it. But I love how, like, it's Elend's turn now. Like, the first book was all about Vin getting into the crew and getting trust from the crew, and now it's Elend's. And, like, I like to think of him still trying to win over, at least, like, Doxson. Like, every time Doxson calls him Your Majesty, like, I can just imagine this undertone of sarcasm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the first time that we've seen the whole crew, well, almost the whole crew together with Elend in the mix now. Because obviously Vin's not there, but we see the rest of the crew all together with Elend now, working with them.
And he does his best to fit right in. And the plan he proposes is more ridiculous than the one they propose. Great, I filled my inner council with a bunch of thrill-seeking masochists. Even worse, I've decided to join them.
I like this idea of him as just being this, like, kid trying to hang out with the cool kids. Like,
he belongs with the cool kids, though.
Yeah, they need him as much as he needs them.
This just further proves how good of a character Elend is and how much I love him, because they basically said, hey, so if you side with Set, you can basically agree to maybe have like a mayorship of the city, because Set doesn't really want it. He just wants to be known as the king of Luthadel. But to Elend, he's like, well, how does Set view Scott? He's like, well, he sees them like a normal nobleman does. And Ellen's like, I won't take that.
We definitely see Elend's character and like how he is, where he's like he is not willing to give up his morals and his principles to save his life.
Except he can't do anything about it because he's still a weenie.
True.
Elend is a weenie. And guess what? In 2 chapters, you're going to get an enumerated list of why he's a weenie. And I didn't even have to write it.
Oh.
Speaking of Elend getting verbally degraded, are we ready for the next chapter?
I just had a quick note. How does Elend know what a keeper is?
From Sazed,
because he's a nobleman, and
the thing is,
well, it's been a year. There's been plenty of time for the crew to have filled him in.
And Vin.
Yeah.
Vin probably filled him in as well.
Particularly Vin, yes.
Yeah.
Because I would think, like, out of everybody in the group, the nobleman should not know what a keeper is. But
right.
I guess the fact that Sazed was there for a time, Vin trusts Elend, and he's trying to gain their trust, like maybe he would have learned about it.
Yeah.
But then why doesn't anybody else come to the realization?
Well, I think even if they did come to the realization, they would have come to the same realization that Elend did, where it's like, if she is a keeper, like, she's not gonna hurt him.
Because they're the good guys.
Like, that's not... She's not going to do that.
Have you ever heard of a bad keeper?
So far, no. Except for maybe Rashik.
That's kind of true.
But he wasn't a keeper. He was a feruchemist.
Yeah.
Keepers are the descendants of the world bringers, right?
Oh, true.
Yes.
I feel a little bit racist now.
Okay.
Whoops.
Okay. So, are you ready for chapter 14?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So, in this chapter, we get to meet our new terrace woman, who is the terrace woman who Vin had spotted in the previous chapter that I had reviewed. In the crowd during Ellen's speech.
Right.
Yeah,
Even then,
like...
Ellen was like, "Hey, it's a terrace woman, Vin. You need to chill."
Yeah. So her name is... We find out that her name is Tyndall. But she is very harsh. She starts by kind of just berating Ellen.
Because he's a weenie.
And
I will hurt you.
he eventually is able to ask why she is there. It takes him a little while to get there, but he eventually asks why she's there, and we find out that she is there because Sazed sent her a letter. Essentially, Sazed asked her, in his own way, to come help Ellen. In his own way, he asked Tyndall to come help Ellen to learn how to be a king. He didn't actually ask her, but he asked her.
Well put.
Yeah. In Sazed's way.
In Sazed's way,
Insinuated.
He insinuated that Ellen needed help and that Tyndall should go help him. So,
yes.
So she has decided that she is going to help Ellen if he wants the help.
If
he commands the help.
So Ellen agrees to learn what she knows. And her specialty is biographies, specifically of generals and kings and leaders. So she has read the stories of the lives of very important people. So, and she knows what it means to be a good leader and what good leaders need.
Yeah, she studied all these famous kings and philosophers and
generals.
great leaders.
Non-weenies.
So, and she's going to help try to impart as much of her knowledge as she can onto Ellen. And Ellen agrees. And what's interesting is we kind of see at the like, oh yeah, there you go, your Mistborn's back. And then it's like, how did you know I was there? And it's like,
I wonder.
We know she was probably using a tin mind, probably for hearing, and heard Vin. But so, which I just thought was funny.
How big do you think is her tin mind then, considering that she seems to be having it on this entire time for enhanced senses?
I don't know if she has it on the entire time. I wonder if she was turning it on periodically to see when Vin showed back up.
But that's still like a fairly large waste of tin.
It's not a binary thing. She can enhance her hearing a little bit or a lot of it. And depending on how much of a bit will depend on how quickly she drains it.
But it still depletes her resources. Like, considering that she's just trying to talk to Ellen, like, why is she wasting the time to listen in for, what is literally just going to be Vin arrives and she's like, "Hi, I'm Tyndall."
But I
knew you were here.
I also feel like hearing is something that is very easy to store.
It could be, but true. I think that would be important for her because if you think about it, she's basically there to tell an unstable woman's boyfriend that he's a weenie and she's there to fix it. And in order to make her point, she's going to be very abrasive and abusive about it. And the unstable woman is a full-on allomancer who killed God and is extremely powerful. And also, did I mention unstable? That's a defense mechanism. She's doing that for a damn good reason.
There's a good reason that she waited until Vin left before revealing herself.
That's what I'm saying. Better to use up a tin mine than to, die a lot.
That's true.
The king's personal assassin comes back.
Yeah. So Ellen sends Tyndall away and gets her rooms to stay in. So Tyndall is now staying at the palace. And the first thing that Vin says to Ellen is, "I don't like her." just
See? Unstable woman with knives.
Because
I can mute you.
She just bullies her way into the palace.
Exactly.
Now she's got a room.
And to be honest, Vin doesn't really like anyone the first time she meets them. Ellen is the exception, but really no one else Vin liked the first time.
She didn't like him the first time either. She was like, how rude is he? But she kind of had a crush on him too, so it was like one of those Sundari things if you're an anime person.
I've noticed whenever Vin likes somebody, there's always like a period of denial.
Like even
herself.
with Kelsier, kind of.
Yeah. But she does like people like off the bat sometimes. Regardless of what she tells herself.
Like even Sasa, she's like, "Can you not stand over my shoulder?"
Yeah, so he steps back one step. That part was great.
Yeah. Alright. So Ellen fills Vin in on their meeting because she stepped out to do her rounds and tells her that the crew agreed to the plan, but they were hesitant about it. Tells them about how the crew seemed like they wanted to go for a different plan, and he's like, that plan's a lot more reasonable than the one that we suggested. Like, is this actually gonna work? So we can tell that Ellen is a little bit nervous about it. Vin tries to reassure him. And it's like, we were able to defeat the Lord Ruler, we can do anything. So but Vin does say that she is worried about things. She is a little bit worried about specifically about the deepness. She's worried about it. She doesn't know what it is. And she's not sure that the Lord Ruler actually defeated the deep. I would also like to point out that Vin does not tell Ellen that she saw the Mist Spirit again. She makes that deliberate decision to not tell him about the Mist Spirit and what happened to her earlier in the night.
Is that because last time it seemed like Ellen didn't really take her seriously?
Yes.
Yeah.
Gave it the classic, "Oh, you've been working too hard."
Yeah. So Ellen tells her a little bit about the deepness, but he doesn't know much either. He tells her that the Lord Ruler was said to have defeated it. There are statues depicting it. She's like, "Yeah, I've seen the statues. It's just this like formless lump on the ground. Like, what is it?" But he's not sure either. And Vin is kind of thinking that maybe the Lord Ruler never did defeat the deepness.
Dun, dun,
Dun,
dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun. She also lets Ellen know that she has learned that not only can Kandra not feel emotional allomancy, they also cannot use allomancy. They cannot use allomancy. So if she senses Ham or Spook using allomancy, then she knows that they're not the imposter. So that's a way Yay!
Woo.
To figure out who may or may not be an imposter.
So, why do you think she doesn't just go around blasting everybody with soothing to see how they react, or trying to ride everyone?
Because
it's rude.
It's well, yeah, but it's like the Eagles thing. Like, why don't the Eagles just fly them to all the way in The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings? Because it's a secret mission. Because this is covert. They're not trying to let the person know that they're onto them. If the spy catches wind, like, oh, for some strange reason, the Mistborn just starts blasting everybody with zinc or brass. Huh, I wonder if they're onto me.
I also think there's a degree of value in the trust that she's built up with these people, and like, if she starts doing that, it's just gonna destroy like all of this work and progress she's made towards being able to trust people.
Yeah, and they also make a point that they haven't told the rest of the crew about the imposter. The only people who know that someone has been replaced by a Khandra are Demu, because he was there when they found the bones and they learned about it, and Ham, because Ham saw the bones and guessed what they were. So
it'd be pretty awkward then if Vin, why are you riding me?
Yeah. So also, Demu and Ham are going around trying to test the palace staff to see if one of them is an imposter as well.
I believe that comes from our dear friend DragonKeiran, who he wasn't able to be here today, but he did want to bring that up. Correct?
Yes.
Yep.
I wondered it too, but I never wondered it out loud, I guess.
That is why I brought it up, because I remembered him posting about it in the Discord. I figured we'd give it a shot.
Now, I personally disagree. I think one could discreetly test the rioting or the soothing in such a way that they, one, wouldn't know who was doing it, or two, wouldn't necessarily know that there was even a rioter or a soother around, but it could be effective enough to show some sort of an effect on the behavior of the person. So, as usual, I'm the odd man out here.
But there's only, 2 people in the crew that have that ability, and only one of them can riot. And Breeze doesn't necessarily just go around soothing people.
Yeah, no, actually, he does all the time.
Actually, yeah, that's exactly what he does.
Exactly what he does.
But he doesn't do it to the ridiculous degree that you would notice it. He does.
When he does,
he does it magnificently, where you won't notice it.
He's very much subtle about it.
Yeah.
But the other thing to consider is that the majority of the palace staff is going to be Ska. And Ska aren't supposed to even know about Allomancy. Yeah. So all of a sudden, why am I so giddy all of a sudden? That's not going to be a bad thing.
But it lets the Khandra know that they're onto them. It lets the Khandra know they're onto them.
Potentially.
My other comment was, I love at the beginning when Tyndall just snaps the ropes and Ellen's like, guards.
Because he's say it with me now.
No.
Weenie.
No.
And you will stay muted.
I did like that, though. It was like the beginning of the chapter. It's like the end of the chapter. Yeah, we can talk. The beginning of the next chapter. She breaks through the ropes.
Yeah. Anything else for 14? No? Okay, I'm going to try to speed through 15. This chapter's a little bit dark. We know that Kwan fought to prove that Alendi was the hero, and that a week and 1 day, very specifically, has passed after leaving the conventicle, and Sazed wakes up to find Marsh gone. Sazed finds himself later in the village of Urbine, using a geography metal mines to orient himself and finds goats just walking about. Concerned, he runs to the village, and he puts on a small tin mine and smells death and corruption. Sazed
Oh,
finds a few
can I
bodies
say
outside. Yes.
I like that he used the tin to smell, and then when it was so nasty, he used it the other way, where he stored his sense of smell so that he couldn't smell it anymore.
Yeah. Very smart.
And I like that a lot. That's funny.
Sazed finds a few bodies outside of hovels, but no visible causes of death. Inside, he finds dozens of dead bodies in each different one, and you can tell that they all died of dehydration and starvation. Sazed wonders if this was a plague, possibly, when he hears movement. In one hovel, he finds a near-dead man. Sazed tries to offer him food, but the man says they ate all the food except for the food. Sazed notices the pile of bones in the center of the room with a blanket tossed over them. The man says the mist came out for weeks, not days, not hours, weeks, and that most who left to go outside died. Sazed mentally curses the Lord Ruler's name, which is a big thing for him, and he asks why some didn't die, but the man just says it's time for food, and he walks over to the one of the corpses. Sazed moves to leave, but stops. He taps Peter and drags the men outside. He asks why the Lord Ruler left and wonders if this is their punishment. Sazed then puts on a steel mine and prepares for a long run back to Luthadel. I don't like this chapter.
Yeah, Sazed's chapters have been so dark, this group.
Why do I have all of Sazed's chapters? I'm not doing it purposefully, I swear.
You did this time.
Did they
this
talk
time I
about...
did because apparently I've been doing it, but...
Yeah, but you'll have to get an Ellen chapter in there eventually, because I know he's your boy. Is this the chapter where they talked about how the process of accessing the memories stored in the copper mind actually kind of washes them of their clarity a little bit?
Yes, that when a person takes a memory out of a copper mind, it corrupts it because it's no longer being stored in pristine condition.
Right,
It's
you
like
slowly forget it a little bit at a time.
Yeah, it's like touching something with your bare hands and the oil kind of ruining it, or taking it out of a vacuum seal.
So the idea is he has these multiple tiered copper minds of like, oh, this is my main hard drive at home where I keep everything crystal clear. And then I have these ones I can take with me on the road. And even if these get distorted, it's okay because I have like the main one back at home.
Says that even comments like he has some copper mines back at Terrace.
Yeah. And as he said, like he has like an index that he can pull out to like figure out where to pull out the specific memories that he's looking for, which I thought was really interesting.
It's so weird. I just love the way it's described in this book because it's like, that's such a cool power, but then reading through it, it kind of gives you the idea of imagining what it would be actually like to have it and how it would actually feel and work.
Yeah. Anything else for 15? Nope. Okay, 16. John, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, so reader, you may want to go ahead and mute me right now. No,
Okay.
I'm kidding. All right. So chapter 16 starts out as a Vin chapter, and she's invoking her inner Ellen. She is reading, searching out of the logbook, looking for references to the deepness, or just anything about that whole terrace religion thing. She's got different piles of pages set aside.
And the mist spirit.
And the mist wraith, yeah. Or the mist spirit, rather. And Orsur's there with her, talking to her about, what she's doing, and he's kind of confused. And Vin is like, don't you remember us talking about this when you were playing Renew? And he's like, I remember you briefly mentioning it or something. And
But
so
also, it serves as a reminder for us.
it
That's the main
does.
thing.
It does, and that's fine. But it's also deeply foreshadowing. Um,
Can we
anyway,
Can I
bleep
say
that?
something before we get too far away from the beginning of this?
please do.
It's just that I love how in the last chapter, like I was just talking about, the way Sazed accesses his memories is like this very deliberate, thought out process where he has the storing of them and the different tiered memory banks. And then you get to Vin, who's like in the
Chaos.
process of working through
Paper
this.
pile
Like,
there,
I'm gonna
paper
rip out
pile
all the
there,
pieces
paper
of
pile
paper.
there.
Oh, this is the useful pieces of paper, and these are the useless ones. And I don't want to sit on the desk.
So I'm gonna sit in the middle of the floor.
Yeah.
There's a lot more horizontal space when you're sitting in a big open space on the floor. That's just kind
As
of
anybody
limiting
who
that way.
has, as anybody who has put together Legos can understand.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So they kind of recap that just a little bit, and Vin kind of reads this section, and she remembers reading about it over a year ago. Now she kind of understands better, having experienced it herself. Because Alendi kind of wonders to himself if he's going crazy, but no, he refuses to believe he's crazy. And the fact that Rashek is blaming him for the mist spirit having stabbed somebody else makes it just that much easier for him to believe that he's not crazy. But Vin has, like, when she stumbles across this, I wanted to make a point of this. When she stumbles across that little clippet, she is like reading for the second or the third time that same section because she keeps, like, her mind keeps wandering. And I had that same issue today while I was like rereading this chapter to make notes. Like, I was like constantly going back, rewinding 2-3 minutes. Like, what was that? Oh, was that important? You know, so like I felt a kinship with Vin for that moment. And there's a POV shift to guess who?
The best
Ellen!
character. I can right click and left click really easily on this mute button. Very careful.
I just want to point out that this is like the third week in a row that I have an Ellen POV, even though it's only half this time. But still, like, this is wild to me.
There's a lot of Elend in this book.
There is, which is fine, because there needs to be at least a second point of view, you know, besides just Vin. So anyway, Elend is up on the walls watching the armies dig in, and he mentions that he wishes there was a cannery and how there's one in Fadrex where Set came from and how it helps his armies and all of that stuff. When Clubs hobbles his little way up the stairs to join him at the top of the wall, and they talk about how everything is kind of in Ellen's hands now, which is just a big, big, sloppy danger sign. Because, well, you know, Ellen's a weenie. But it's all up to him, so he's got to put on his big boy pants and man up. Speaking of, Clubs tells Ellen that there's somebody waiting for him down at the bottom of the stairs, and she insists that he come down. She's basically summoning the king, which just goes to show you the fact that he wasn't like, no, she can come to me, thank you very much. Shows you exactly how much of a weenie he is at this point.
That just shows how nice he is.
No, he is a weenie at this point, and it's important to note that because he's about to get a lesson in how not to be a weenie. Because when he does go meet up with Tindwell, she gives him a complete makeover. She gives him a new suit, she gives him a cape, she gives him a crown, she tells him he's going to start training, and she gives him this big list of things that he's got to do. She even says he's got to learn how to walk better, and he's just like, okay, yup. But what? But no. And he puts up a fuss because he doesn't want to cut his hair, of all things. Like, he's like, no, I like my hair. I don't want to do that. Wah. And
well,
she's like,
I mean, I get that. Like,
I do too. I mean, I get it, but I'm also not trying to, you know, support an image. So we get to this point where he goes and he puts on this uniform, complete with the cape and the crown, and he walks out and he looks at it and he goes, yeah, okay, cut my hair. Because he realizes at this point that he's been projecting and personifying weeniedom, and that's not what he needs. So he has acknowledged that about himself, and he's actually taking the first step to being a man. Put that knife down, because this is where he actually takes the first step towards being a better king, being a better person. This is the spot where he turns around, and he takes that first step.
I would argue it is his first step to being a better king, not necessarily a better person, because he is already a very good person, but he is not a good king.
Okay,
there's
a better
Ellen
leader.
the noble.
Yes,
and then there's
Ellen,
Ellen
a
the
better
king.
leader. I will agree with a better leader.
So he acknowledges that he is not the most fit for leadership that he could be. And he realizes that, and he decides that, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do it right. I'm going to make the changes I need to make to be the leader that I have to be to survive this siege, to lead my people through, and to make something of what we've built. So he takes his first step away from weeniedom towards heroism. It's so much fun to watch you freak out.
For audio listeners, I am very much wanting to take a knife and just jam it right there.
Just so that we know, we can establish that he's not being homicidal. He's literally on the other side of an ocean. He can't physically harm me. It's all joking.
Yes, it's all
I don't know,
joking.
man. He could stab you through the Discord window. I've seen some crazy stuff happen.
Dragon Steel Con 2023.
This is for calling Ellen to weenie.
I'm gonna be dressed up as him. I'm just gonna.
And you know what?
What are you gonna say?
Unless you're wearing a white uniform with a cape. Oh, look, it's the weenie.
And that's when you'll find yourself face planted into the ground. Okay. Ignoring everything you're saying just to rile me up, I do agree. I very much like his transition from Ellen to the nobleman and scholar into Ellen the king. And I like the very literal part where he has to go and change, and he has to literally push aside his books to make way for him to change.
Right. So we see a literal, figurative, and sort of mental transition, and we get to see that switch flip. So we can expect lots of changes from this somewhat foppish young man who's about to become, a much less foppish leader.
My cannon will hurt you.
This was such a good, just her Tyndall just whipping him into shape like Edna Mose in The Incredibles, which is awesome. And she's like, you want variation? You can wear different colored capes, but from now on, everything you do is going to be in that white uniform. And you're going to train, but you're not going to train in public because we don't want people to see you getting your butt whooped by your girlfriend.
I forgot
private
about
sword lessons.
And it's also nice because we're already seeing him change. He's already starting to take her lessons and adapt them into his life with his interactions with her in this chapter versus the first chapter with her.
And that's part of why Ellen is so good, is that he's willing to okay, yeah, I understand how this is going to help. And he does. And outside of just the way Tyndawyl kind of, forces it upon him, he does take everything easily.
He knows he's in over his head.
Self-aware. Because after all,
but
he
nobody
cultivated
tries
that.
as hard.
He cultivated that aspect mostly to annoy his father.
Yeah.
But he cultivated that. He lived it so much that it became who he is.
A few things I wanted to note is Fedek, the guy who first of all, coming in live, we've got DragonKeiran joining us.
Hello.
We are just finishing up chapter 16.
Beautiful.
Still in the spoiler-free time, just as a warning.
Okay, good to know. No
Okay.
worries. Keep on going.
I just want to bring up that Fennec, who was the one that got stabbed by the mist spirit, was referenced in the Final Empire. And if you go back and reread the excerpts at the top, he was referenced there. He was the one who found the well, or the glowy thing, or whatever it is.
The glowy thing.
Yeah. um,
The MacGuffin.
I liked how clubs called Kelsier a selfish dandy before the pits.
Yeah, he was definitely that.
Yeah.
I like that too.
And I love Tindywill's comment how you cannot always rely on your woman to protect you.
Which he can't. He can't always rely on her to protect him because sometimes she's not going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And him knowing how to protect himself will allow her to feel better about, like, when she's going out on her rounds, or if she has to be doing something other than being by his side. It will make her feel more comfortable knowing that he knows how to protect himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my last comment is, what the heck is a dueling cane? Like, I don't think I actually fully... Is it literally just a cane that can be used to hit people with?
The cane made out of particularly hard wood.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I
So
think
it's
there's a
so
knob
it's
at the
fashioned
end.
out of a stronger wood to be used for dueling as well as cane usage.
The dueling canes do come up in Mistborn a lot.
Yeah. I like them though. I also like capes. And I like Ellen's uniform change. Anything else for chapter 16?
Nothing for the non-spoiler section.
Okay. Then let's move on to chapter 7. Sorry.
The only thing I like to add at the end of 16 is just I really like Tendrils' answer. Wasn't sure of like what do you think makes a good king? Trust. So wasn't sure if you had already brought that up, but
No, not yet. That's awesome.
Let's head on into 17. Swiggity, I believe that's you.
All right. So, kind of where we last left her, Vin is looking for references to the deepness in the Lord Ruler's logbook. She's got all the pages scattered across the floor, and she just keeps finding more and more things as she goes through it. We get a little backstory about how Reen taught her how to read so that she could impersonate a noblewoman, but Vin never really found it to be that useful. Up until now. She decides to do something she's never really done before and take notes. So she goes over to the desk, gets some ink, and then goes back over to the middle of the floor. And Orsor says some snarky stuff. It seems like they're bonding a little bit more here.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, sorry, I lost where I was.
I love his attitude in this.
Yeah, I like when he says like, I'll believe if you command me to.
I was more so on like, aren't you fine just like sitting there? Well, we do get tired and bored, mistress.
So Ellen knocks on the door, and he's still kind of like proper, and it's kind of fun. He's like, "Oh, you might be changing," which we almost had an anime moment there. But he comes in, and for just a second, Vin is like, her fight or flight goes off until she realizes that it's actually Ellen, but he's just dressed to the nines and he has a nice haircut. And I love the detail that she appreciates the getup because not only does it look good on him, but the cape will come away easily in a fight, and his short hair won't get grabbed in a fight. Because, of course, she relates everything back to combat.
It's just who she is.
So, Ellen sees that she's taking notes, and he's like, "Oh my God, you're doing research! Like, who are you, and what have you done with Vin?"
He's like a proud parent.
Yeah.
Your handwriting's so beautiful.
A proud teacher.
For a moment, my brain went through the This will age me a little bit, but the Wallace and Gromit when he goes, cheese.
Jeez, Gromit.
You're writing
I
notes.
just imagined Ella doing that. You were. Oh my god.
Did you write these?
Studying.
It was me when one of my students told me that he practiced reading over the break. I was like, "You practiced reading over the break?"
Special applause to that kid.
Seriously.
Shout out, Timmy. Good job.
But I like how Ellen is clean and Vin is taking notes. It really is the end of times.
Oh, that's so funny. She's trying to change the subject because she's like, "Don't look at my notes. Didn't you say something about her being a messenger?" And he's like, "Oh yeah. So, who is this messenger but the Watcher?" Dun dun dun.
Dun, dun,
And
dun.
he's just kind of standing there all watchery. And Vin is like, "Hey, be careful. That guy is a Mistborn." And he says that he's Straff's ambassador, and that Straff is willing to meet, but that he's not going to come into Luthadel because he's weary of assassins. And Ellen is like, "Well, I'm not impervious to assassinations." And he says, "Don't worry, we'll protect you from Set's assassins." Which I love because it's like, okay, but what about any of your assassins? Which is what I was really worried about. So Ellen agrees to think about it, and he'll send a message when he's made up his mind. And Vin leaves, or Zane leaves before. Zane leaves, but not before he addresses Vin, and he says, "Oh, I've heard of the beautiful Mistborn who slayed the Lord Ruler."
And by
And he's
addresses, you mean hits on.
Yeah, right in front of Ellen. And also another thing I love about this part is that it's this cool dichotomy of you have Ellen in his brand new white outfit, and you have Zane who's wearing all black, and they're just juxtaposed right now, and
you
it's
got
just a
Vin
really
who's
cool
wearing
moment.
the grays of her mist cloak.
Yeah, caught in between it.
Yep.
So, he ends up leaving, and later Vin is out doing what she always does, stalking in the night. And she's there with Ursur, and Ursur is wise to her. He's like, "I know why you're really out here." And she's like, "Yeah, I got a patrol like I always do." And he's like, that's when he says, "Oh, are you going to command me to believe that?" But the real reason she's out, and besides trying not to think of the Mist Spirit, is she wants to see the Watcher. She wants to see Zane and fight again, because she likes having someone that actually challenges her. So guess who actually shows up? Zane. Imagine that, right?
Wow.
So she chases him, and he leads her all the way to Keep Hastings. And they start fighting a little bit, and it becomes clear that he's challenging her to not fall. It's like whoever falls first loses.
They're playing the floor is lava.
Yeah, I had that in my notes, actually.
Mistborn style. Where you get to shove each other and attack each other with coins.
And this, so this is the first week I've ever just read the chapters and not done the audiobooks, and I'm so glad I did, because you have such a great time picturing what's actually happening, going line by line. When you do the audiobook in these sections, I always get kind of lost for the action. So I recommend reading through this if you have it. She shoots her coins at him, and he pushes them all away, and then he shoots one past her, and then he pulls it so it's like digging into her back. And so at this point they're having like a pushing match, and the coin's digging into her back. And it's a good callback to when Kelsier said in the first book not to ever get into a direct pushing match because you don't weigh enough and you'll probably lose. But she does a cool move where she stops pushing on him and she avoids getting caught again because it seemed like he was trying to grab her again. But what she does do is she turns around and she uses Kelsier's signature move when he's not looking. She plants feet first into his face. Which we need a counter for that at this point. So Zane pushes all the coins away from both of them, and she plummets to the ground, and she looks around thinking, okay, well, if all the coins were gone, then Zane must have fell too. But somehow, he had another one. Inexplicably. And it's a cool moment that we kind of talked about, I think it was last time, where he's displaying how you can push softly on a coin and kind of balance, instead of always just shooting off and ricocheting.
He hovers and then turns. Menacingly.
Yeah, he's clearly like really skilled with this stuff.
But it does take a lot of effort.
Yeah. I mean, what? He must have been practicing. We don't really know how long at this point, right? Like, we have no way of gauging that.
Yeah, we know nothing about Zane, really, besides he's a Straff's Mistborn at this point, so yeah.
Yeah.
He could be the most powerful Elementor we've seen yet, for all we know.
Yeah, but probably.
To make a long story short, he's basically like tempting Vin to the dark side here. He keeps saying like, "Why do you play their games? Why do you let them treat us like slaves? You know, they don't understand us. We're both outsiders." And try as she might to convince herself and him that, you know, her love is solid and she can't be swayed, a part of her agrees that she needs to fight with this guy again. So there's a little bit of doubt being sown here.
Okay. Before I comment about the coin thing, now I just have in my mind, you know, Palpatine Zane just like going, burn it. Give it. Burn it. Screw it. Push it.
Screw it. Pull it.
But
Bop it.
But we also learned how he was doing, where he was pulling all these coins from, in which he had them in his mouth, which is a really simple trick of just having, you know, it hidden behind your skin, but, you know, your mouth opens.
I forgot to mention that.
But do we think that Zane had 3+ coins hidden in his mouth, or was he, you know, using one and then when Vin wasn't looking, pulling one and tossing it back into his mouth?
I could see him having. Well, I'm like picturing like nickel-sized coins, so you could have like 3 of those in your mouth at
nickel,
once.
penny kind of style.
Yeah.
But we see him like actually talk, like he grabs Vin and he talks to her. And like, have you ever tried to talk with like 2+ coins in your mouth? Like even one is annoying.
Well, here, how many points is it like, oh, he shouldn't have any coins, and then he has one? My understanding is twice.
Yeah, so he has like 3 coins in his
and
mouth.
then there's a third point when Vin is like, how did you do that? And he like pulls another coin out of his mouth.
Yeah.
So you don't need to use your hands to push and pull. Could you just pull a coin into your mouth?
Right.
Like how you do like popcorn.
And I know it talks about it twice, but my understanding was that I thought it explained one of the, like it alluded one of the times that he had just pulled a coin back to himself.
There was a point in time where he pulls a coin, but he uses it, I believe. And like that's how he does the grappling hook thing, I think.
I'm gonna have to. I have to. I re-listened to these on audio. I'm gonna have to double check via. I'm looking right now. I'm just trying to.
But either way, I still love the idea of like him shooting off a coin, having to pull it back, and like immediately thrown it in his mouth. He's like,
Maybe
"Wait,
one was up his nose.
that's mud."
1, 2, 3. There you go. talk with one in your mouth and one up each nostril. Then you just like sneeze it out. Phew.
Always stay strapped.
Any other notes for 17 before we move on to general thoughts and then into the spoiler section? Okay, so general thoughts, just kind of throw them out. I do want to ask if anybody could have, since we dealt with Feruchemy so much in this, if you could have one ferochemical power, what would you want to have?
I would want to have the copper mines. That's what I would want.
We're just talking about Feruchemy that we've learned up to this point, right? Because we're not in the spoiler section.
Yes.
Yeah.
So copper, tin, pewter, steel, iron. Yeah. And technically atium, because we know that's what the Lord Ruler did. Am I forgetting any others?
Probably speed.
But that's steel. That's
Yeah, I would want steel as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you would store it. You could store it so often. Anytime you're just hanging out, not doing anything.
Vegging, watching something, watching TV.
Driving, like, yeah.
You wouldn't want to do that while you're driving.
Okay, true.
I need to turn left. Shoot, I got a brake.
Maybe riding a car.
Brake.
Yeah.
When you're not the one driving.
Yeah.
When you're not the one driving, yes.
Great. Now I'm just imagining like a ferochemist and his family in an RV, and the kids are just storing speed. Okay, we're making a pit stop, and they're just running at like Mach 3 everywhere.
Just gone.
That would be hilarious.
I mean, in a way, though, that's like, hey, everyone, we gotta store sleep. Everyone passes out in the car. Yes. Silent for the drive. That's what I want.
Applications. I'm trying to think of modern applications for storing your speed. Like, what would it be a good scenario for you to be really slow in?
Like
maybe dancing. Why? What happens in Squid Game?
It's the
one where you gotta like stop moving when like
the red light, green light one.
Red light, yeah. Play red light, green light if you die if you move.
But that wouldn't be good because your reactions would be slower.
Well, what I would do is like if it turns around, you store so much speed that you stop. That you basically stop, even if you're like in a mid step. You just like.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Is that
and then when it turns around, then you just tap it and you cross the line before it can turn around again.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. But Dragon and John, what ferochemic abilities would you want?
I don't know. That's.
I'm torn between copper and steel because steel is like, that would be so cool. Mm-hmm. There's just times I just like want to get somewhere and not drive and just be like, I'm just there in an instant. But the amount of speed that it would take to store, to move at that speed, like to run on like what would normally be like a half an hour drive on the freeway, which is already like 70, 75 miles an hour, to then move there in a split second, like the amount of months that it would take is just like, would it really be worth it? Whereas copper, I'm just like so terrible at remembering stuff. It's just like, oh, here's my index. I just remember everything now. So, and the amount of usage I think would just come so much more from copper. I think I'd go with copper, although steel would be like way cooler too at the same time.
Here's a question: if you store enough speed to be able to go, say, arbitrarily stupidly fast for 30 seconds, we'll say like Mach 10, would the ferochemy protect your body from the effects of the rapid acceleration?
I was actually just thinking this because we see that pewter doesn't just make you strong, but it also gives you more muscle mass. So
it doesn't change your mass. That's the whole point.
No.
Feruchemy,
when you store strength, gives you more muscle.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what he's talking about. It gives you like the muscle mass to actually like
So
physically have that.
So would somebody with steel in Feruchemy, would it make their body able to take more speed?
It has to, because
Yeah.
I mean, I would think so. I have other comments to make in
I
spoiler
would
section for
assume
this.
so.
Yeah.
I would
It
assume
talks-
so.
It's
When
talked
you
about
store
later.
weight, I guess that's a spoiler.
I think we should move this conversation into spoiler section.
Okay, we'll
now.
talk about it.
Yeah, that's
later.
a good point. Yeah.
This is a great say to say we learned about Feruchemy. Here's some ideas and thoughts around it. Come join us in the spoiler section if you wanna giggle about all the laws of.
It'll be the first thing we talk about, and we'll give a second warning before we start going into other things.
Yeah.
But any other main thoughts and opinions about these 6 chapters? We got Feruchemy, we've got Ellen becoming a king, we've got Vin doing research.
Dogs and cats living together.
Mass hysteria. So, anything else, or are we just heading straight into the spoiler section?
Spoil me like your French girls.
Didn't like that. Why did you do that?
I do like the fact that we learn a little bit more about Zane, and just like we're starting to learn about this aspect. Like, people are doing different things, right? We're seeing what's the effect of character growth in a sense, in that talking about transition from book 1 to book 2, right? It has been a year. Characters have developed and grown in the directions that we've expected them to, but there's a growth. It's been a year, and so we're kind of seeing this effect on like. But there's also this aspect of like Vin being like, oh, but there's another Mistborn, someone that actually might understand me, because she's always felt alone. No matter what, she's always felt alone, and she always felt most connected to Kelsier. So now now that's gone, and again, it's like this is in a sense and kind of an expected thing, because she keeps herself separate. And she very specifically, purposely has separated herself. We don't entirely know why, but we know there's been some aspects between like her and Ellen and like stuff like that. And like the rest of the crew, like she just doesn't like. There's like this bit of a separation. So you can kind of start getting this like, why are we here, Master? We're just on patrol.
Is it some great big mistake? Or is it some part of a grand creature's creational plan? Why are we here?
Right. But and it's like you've got Orsuer like talking about stuff like that, and she's just like, oh, but it's like you can see this aspect of like she's starting to kind of like dote on Zane in a way, and it's like she's found someone that she can connect with. I've got to spar with him next time. Like, you're starting to see these changes in her mental state, but it's also a throwback to her old mental state.
Because he even
that's what I like about
like
these chapters.
Yeah. He even one of the first thing he does here is like, here's this new trick to hide a coin in your mouth that Vin just never thought of.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to make those comments about that.
Well,
otherwise I'm done.
Anything else? Going once, going twice. Okay. Thank you so much for sticking around so far into this episode. We're going to head into the spoiler section next. We highly recommend that if you've not read this book, the entire series, or potentially the entire Cosmere, you stop here, because it's very likely we'll talk about everything and anything. However, if you are up to date on this story, feel free to stick around. It's likely we will bring up details you may have forgotten or plot threads that are still yet to come. Please be sure to subscribe, leave a like, star, heart, or whatever it is on this video or audio. And don't be afraid to comment your own thoughts and predictions. We would love to hear from you. But this is where we leave you. Then my name is Reader, and I have been joined by Swiggity Swoo.
Thanks for sticking around.
DragonKeiran.
See you in a minute.
John.
Ellen's not quite a weenie anymore.
And Kay.
It's good to be here.
And this has been Cosmere Connections. Okay, now that we're in the spoiler section, what feruchemical ability would you like to have if it changes?
I would still like copper because I just think copper is cool. I think it would be fun to have the copper mines and to be able to like remember things and like store memories.
I'm still sticking with speed.
Yeah, I still don't know. There's. Hold on.
I'm going back to connection.
Well, I was gonna say, what else do we have access to now that we're in the spoiler section?
Oh yeah, I guess that's the question. Like, do we want to bring in
There's-
Era 2 stuff, or I guess we're doing this as like a spoiler of like people that have maybe read more of the Mistborn, at least Era 1. They
Yeah.
know more about the basics.
We're gonna keep
Feruchemy.
this. This is gonna be limited to just Feruchemy right now.
Let's do Feruchemy and let's do Era 1 Feruchemy as well, not Era 2, just for those that haven't read like a little bit, but this isn't, like you said, we'll do like a sub spoiler and then we can do like a full Cosmere spoiler.
Yeah. So the
sub
metals
spoiler
we know are iron, which stores physical weight, steel, which stores physical speed, tin, which stores senses, and pewter, which stores strength. Those are the physical. With the cognitive, we've got zinc storing mental speed. We've got brass that stores warmth, copper, which stores memories, and bronze, which stores wakefulness.
will end there because those are the 8 basic, and then adium obviously, but those are the 8
atium
basic.
that stores age,
I know,
and
but we're
gold
sticking
that
with
stores
Arrow.
health.
Okay.
These are
Yes, that's true.
in.
Right, there you go. You're right. You're right. So
We've also got
up to 10.
We've also got aluminum.
Are we? But they don't talk about what aluminum stores in Arrow 1.
Aluminum stores.
So
okay, I see what you mean now. Okay,
with that, I'm gonna actually change it to zinc, mental speed.
that would be cool.
That'd be really cool.
I don't think I would take zinc because I'd just go spin around in circles faster. Like, that wouldn't help me.
But you can slow your thoughts down if you need to.
Uh,
So when I get
That'd be
overly
cool.
anxious, when I
That
get
would be
crazy
cool.
hyperactive in ADHD, I can slow my thoughts and go, okay, hold on. It's going to take me a lot of effort to get to this thought. Do I want to go to that thought, or do I now want to stop and change direction?
That is kind of cool.
And now I
the
can
idea of like
reorient myself, and so I can actually use that to help control my anxiety, in a sense.
I like
slow
the
me
idea of
down.
like a therapist or a school counselor being able to provide that, either with
So,
yeah.
but then
smart.
also as an ADHD, if once I get hyper focused and I'm thinking a million thoughts a second already, then I speed that up and I'm now compounding basically my own ADHD thoughts. But when I'm hyper fixated, now all of a sudden the amount of thought that I can pour into something like writing a book, working on a customer, talking with a friend, like any sort of subject that needs to be taken care of immediately, I need to think of a solution. I can now speed up my thoughts in a controlled direction. So it's the fact the great thing about Feruchemy is the duality. Is it's not just a pull out. Is you can use many of the metals 2 ways. And now if you pick the right metal, you now have 2 uses instead of 1.
Yeah, that's cool. I hadn't thought about that for that one at all.
So
we have been going for a little bit of while now. Is there anything else about Feruchemy before we move on to the actual spoiler stuff?
Oh, you got to be a blood maker.
With gold.
Now
This
that
is gonna
gold,
encourage me to
yeah.
do dumb stuff. Like,
What's wrong with that?
I don't.
Swiggity, let's jump off a 10-story building. Yeah.
I've always wanted to, get into extreme sports.
My name is Swiggity, and welcome to Bloodmaker.
Woo! Swiggity, you forgot your rings. Oh.
For anyone who's listening who does not realize what a blood maker is, it's someone who stores health.
Yeah, it's gold.
Good point.
It's gold.
Yeah. We get funny names, but yeah.
Okay, let's move on into the actual thing, and we try to speed run through these. And, to just countermand my own comment about speed running, what the heck is the Continental, like, even for? Like, it was where Kawan went to.
Conventicle?
Yeah, the conventicle. It was where Kawan went to. He carved his thing into it, and then Rashek built this place on top of it.
So the
It's
conventicle of Saren, my theory is simply that he wrote down, like, he found some little cave out in the middle of nowhere where no one was going to find his writings, right? And he then beat out this metal plate and he put it up. So either one, Rashek then found it and went, cool, let's stick the conventicle, let's stick all my Steel Inquisitors over it, preserve
so
it.
that
Or two, he found it somewhere else and he just took the sheets of metal and he stuck them in the conventicle of Saren.
I would
And then he
guess
just nailed them up there.
it's the first one was that he had either found or Quan had told him that he had left these writings somewhere because he knew Quan. He was friends with Quan beforehand. So
Well, he was his
something.
I
nephew,
mean,
right?
he was
they're
his
related.
nephew. Yeah. Well, I was like, I couldn't remember if they were related, but I was like, they knew each other. They were like friendly, on friendly terms with each other. But and then he built it. He built the conventicle of Saren around it to prevent people from reading those writings, from being able to go in and read the writings that Quan had left, because he didn't want people to know about the prophecies.
So this is just like the Alendi's logbook, and
Yes.
Rashek apparently doesn't want to destroy anything that might trace back to his secret.
I could see that. I mean, what would be a safer place for it than the home of the Steel Inquisitors?
Melting it down! That would be the best place for it.
But here's we already see that that Rashek is sentimental about certain things from the past,
Yeah.
right?
But
He
then
likes holding on to
why wouldn't he keep this one in Krennic Shaw then? Like where
because
he was.
He
Because he
might not have
doesn't.
been able to move it easily.
Also, he doesn't like his obligators finding out everything, but he lets his Steel Inquisitors in on things that otherwise wouldn't know. Also, we understand like steel lines, and I don't know. Anyway, but the point is like, so he like lets the Steel Inquisitors kind of know certain aspects about him that he doesn't let like his general public know, and so any of his like Tavidian could have just like walked around just about anywhere he wanted to, so he could have seen these metal plates and read them, and he doesn't want that knowledge to be dispersed freely. But he's also
Okay.
sentimental. That's my reasoning.
Also,
Okay.
to answer your question earlier of what was the conventicle used for, because that's what you were asking as well, reader, correct?
Yes.
I think it was used as the place that the Lord Ruler was having the Inquisitors experiment with hemalurgy.
Hemalurgical experiments.
Yes, hemalurgical experiments to try to find new bind points.
Because in Hero of Ages it talks about he tried for 1,000 years to find new bind points, and he never found a new one.
Yeah.
Well, and even in the chapter where they're in there, with Sazed talks about how the spikes, some of them have blood on them, and he's not going to handle those ones.
Yeah.
Because he's like reading it out loud, or he's like enunciating all this his stream of consciousness out loud to help memorize it more easily.
Yep.
So that's for sure what they were doing there, and I think part of the reason that the Inquisitors were there, and we were sort of talking about this, Reader and I, before we started the podcast, is that the Inquisitors don't seem to be able to read the steel.
The Inquisitors can,
Yes.
but Ruin cannot.
Yes.
See, and that's the problem, because as soon as Preservation dies, Ruin can take over the Inquisitors and know the things they know and see the things they see.
No.
But he still needs regular people to read the steel.
No. He cannot read their minds. Ruin cannot read people's minds.
That was Preservation's power. Because in
Right,
Secret
but
History,
he can take over. He can control them and hear what they say. So all he would have to do is control them to read the thing on the plate out loud and know it.
And
Correct.
he does do that in Secret Histories. He has Marsh read off a plate.
Hero
but it still
in
relies.
Hero of Ages. In Hero of Ages.
Oh, it happens in Hero. Okay,
Yeah.
but it still relies on the Inquisitor reading it and Ruin just being able to overhear.
Yeah.
So, and nothing changes to make the Inquisitors be able to read it in between the two. They could always read it. And that's what I was about to say that, but I'm like, no, that's not right. Because they can see the impressions in the metal, the variants from the
Right,
divots.
they should be able to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so they can read it, and he was able to take them over and guide them before Preservation's death. But
Right, as we sort of see with Marsh already.
So, yeah.
Right, Marsh is already acting in this book like very erratically. You're like, why did he? And like, I didn't honestly. I'm ashamed to say I didn't realize it until probably like one or two, like 2 rereads ago. That I was like, shoot, like because he's getting like very very directly influenced on like, and I brought it up. You know, is like he like comes in and he interrupts Sazed at like just the right time. That Sazed can't like internalize. Don't write things on metal. But let me put it on a piece of paper so that
let's rush out of here.
Yeah, like it's very obvious, like that influence, and I feel ashamed that it took me, 15 plus rereads to pick up on that.
And Ruin did know what was on that the plate that Sazed found, because otherwise he wouldn't have had Marsh lead Sazed to it.
Because Marsh probably went in and read it aloud for him at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had Sazed go find it so that he could manipulate Sazed.
Yeah. So this is a little bit confusing for me, so I'm just having it. So this entire thing was Marsh brought Sazed here just so Sazed could find that. Because Marsh just goes to the Inquisitor bedroom for no reason.
Does he actually go to the Inquisitor bedroom?
Does he?
hiding around the corner?
He says he's just like, will you get it? He's like plastered against the wall, just sneaking.
Okay now.
So the entire thing was just to bring Sazed there?
Yes.
Okay. And all the other Inquisitors, I'm guessing, they killed the servants and then they left?
They went up north.
Yeah.
And Sazed asks to Luthadel, and he's like,
that and
north.
More.
That and more. Because they went up to Terrace.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot about Terrace.
They went up to Terrace. Yeah, to go find all of the Feruchemists who are now out of hiding.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else for 12 then? Okay, let's keep going. 13. The comment about the rogue conjurer was funny.
Yeah. Basically, they can't break the contract. Why can't they break the contract again? Because I don't remember.
Tradition.
Just out of pride, tradition.
That's all it is?
Yep.
Yeah, that's about all it is.
Oh my gosh. I thought there was like
There's no magical... Nope.
Yeah. No. They're just prideful beings.
This is the way it is. That's literally it.
Wait, well, I mean...
The first generation says so.
Well, but he was there and talked with the first generation and talked with the Lord Ruler, so he also understands, like, Tensoon understands why they had the contract, which is, this was to protect us, right? Like, the contract was there to make them subservient. So it's like, yes, it's pride to stick to the contract, but it's been ingrained in them so hard for centuries that if you break contract, not only will you be punished,
acidized,
murdered, or locked away forever, but it's because you're risking like your family. It's like being like, if you go blab about, if it's like they're like the people that are like so tight knit as a family that it's like, if you say anything bad, then it's like your entire family will literally kill you, kind of a situation. And it's like, but if you also say something, it could literally get everyone killed, and so they just like won't say anything to like judge, jury, nothing. It's just like zip closed. That's kind of the situation that they have, is like so ingrained, this like respect, and just like, if I say anything about my contract or break contract, I could get everyone killed.
Well, and the reason that they started doing contracts in the first place was because of
Mistborn control.
Mistborn control. So as a way to like keep themselves from being controlled by Mistborn.
Yeah.
Right.
What was Preservation trying to do when he touched Vin, shot the pain up through your earring because it's of ruin? Like, was he trying to just touch her and tell her something?
I think he was just kind of trying to communicate with her, and because she was acting, I think, more with Ruin at that point. And that was the pain with her earring.
Yeah. I got
I
nothing
did
else
notice
for
that
13.
detail though. Like it specifically calls out that it started from her ear.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Right. Yeah.
how do you miss that?
Oh.
I caught that this time too. I was like, oh, forgot about that.
Yeah. I hate him so much. Anything else for 13?
Oh wait, hold on. Was it 13 or was it 14?
14. 14.
You posted notes about 14, but you said it
did.
was 13.
Oh, I said one was 13 is just like test when Tensoon says Condor can't feel emotional allomancy manipulation.
Which
That was 13, and then I also dropped something for 14, which is Ellen with Ellen. So like Tensoon says Condor can't feel emotional allomancy manipulation, so why doesn't she just start slapping everyone with emotional allomancy? Like literally just walk around and just be like, oh hey, what's up? And they're like, hey, why'd you make me so mad? And then she'd be like, you're not the Condor girl. And then just like walk up to the next person, and then they're like, huh?
Okay, we already did a conversation about this, and
Okay.
I don't
I
think
must
we
have
should
missed
get
that
back
then.
into it. But it
Okay.
basically boiled down to we don't want the Conjurer to know we're onto them.
I mean, if you just single them out one at a time, then it won't really matter. So,
But then they'll
yeah.
figure out that, yeah, okay.
Okay, no worries. I won't go into it. I just thought we were going to save that for as a spoiler section, since that's talking about like what happens in future chapters on how she discovers.
No, it's
about.
a good idea. It's just it's like the Eagles in the Lord of the Rings. It's a covert mission. You can't just fly up straight to Mordor.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And my next one's around 14.
Yeah. So 14. So Tynduil wants Sansa to be more forceful. I thought that was kind of funny. And then I have, did Rashek make all the plants die, or was it a natural correlation of him moving the planet?
It was, so when he moved the planet, he realized that the plants weren't going to survive. Well, so when he moved the planet, it was too hot. The plants started dying. He created the ash mounts, filled the air with ash. Then he realized that the plants weren't going to be able to survive in the ashen environment, so he changed the plants. Changed how the plants could grow. Would grow and like the amount of sunlight, like what they needed to grow. And also added the microbes to the water to help break down the ash that was now falling from the sky.
Yes, but did like Rashek, not immediately change this, because we know he went through, like, he fixed one thing and then had to fix another thing, and it kept getting smaller and smaller. But do we think that we know he did the Ash Mountain, and that over time turned the sky red, as well as, the fact that they're now a couple 100 billion miles closer to the sun. But did he change the plant thing, and did that turn all the plants brown, or did the next generation, when those plants died, they sprouted up new plants that grew it? Like, I'm wondering, was there a bit of time after Rashek's ascension that there was still a bit of the old world left?
Yes, but it's a very tiny amount. Each of those changes was successive, and the reason he made those changes rather than reverting to previous changes because the power was fading from him quickly. And as he was using it, it was going faster and faster, so we had to do something different to protect what was left and keep it from being destroyed by his previous change. So
but that all happened in like milliseconds. Yeah. So I'm
very
wondering,
tiny amount of time.
When Rashek turned back into human, was there a point in time, like, when everything was still settling, when there was a point in time when the sky was turning red. Was there a point in time when the green plants were dying and these brown ones came?
Probably.
Or was
Going
it by the time that Rashik turned back to human, was the sky red with the plants brown?
It'd
Did
have
everybody
to be,
just suddenly like?
I think it would all
some
happen.
of it would have to be gradual because like so he got the ash mounts and he well no you're right because he has to get the ash mounts, set them up, and spin enough ash into the air, force enough ash into the air so that way it immediately wouldn't. Because remember when Vin clears out the mist and the ash, everything just like plants, it just like starts lighting on fire, literally just like burning. So he immediately has to push enough ash and turn the sky black to stop it. So yeah, ash has to be immediate. Plants are immediately going to start suffocating, so he has to immediately change that. To at which point they all turn brown. So yeah, it had to be like everyone's just sitting enjoying some tea, and all of a sudden you start burning up, and then you're like, "Boom! I'm gonna die! What? Sky's black! What? Sun's red! Where'd my plants?"
Okay, so there was a time when that happened. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I was just thinking the other thing. Yeah, has to be in a second. That would be the weirdest thing, having tea out on your patio, and suddenly it's just like, planet
red,
lurches, sky's red, and you're everyth's dying, and you're like, my dear, that was sudden.
Yeah. Somebody said they had something for this chapter.
Yeah, I was just kind of the thought around Ellen, just kind of was like, oh, like 2 armies isn't enough. You got to worry about all of world, dying and everything. Like ha 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 ha, joke joke joke, and then literally this like in the beginning of Hero of Ages, it's just like, oh my gosh, I just can't worry about the world when I've got people to save and armies, 2 cities to conquer. Like, holy crap, Vin, what am I gonna do? And so it's like that little moment is like, har har har. I haven't seen any dark gods trolling around. And then it's like dark god, trolling through the city like wee.
Yeah.
So.
I do feel kind of like it seems pretty clear that the deepness and the mists are connected. And, like, it just seems really obvious, maybe it's just from the reader's perspective, but like, how do they not kind of figure out that these two things are connected?
Right.
Okay, anything else for 14?
Well wrapped.
I'm good.
Okay, then we've got 15. I don't really think there was much spoiler stuff to happen with the cannibal chapter.
Well, I guess this is the first time that we're actually seeing the results of what happens when the mists stay out during the daytime.
That's
all
true.
of the time.
Yeah.
Which is
and
definitely
how the
big.
people can't handle it.
Yeah, it's definitely big foreshadowing for what's going to be happening.
Yeah.
So, there is a mist sickness. It wasn't just their fear, right?
So,
yes.
Yes and no. So, there was the mist sickness that was killing some people, hurting people, and then they got up and were fine, and then ignoring some of the people. So, because they weren't sure about what was going to happen when they went out into the mist, whether the mist was going to attack them or not, they stayed in their houses in fear.
Do we know why it was killing some people and why it wasn't? Like, I know that the ones who survived all became seers.
No.
They all became mistings.
They all became mistings.
Okay.
The ones who stayed sick for 16 days after they fell became seers. ETM mistings.
Okay. But there's no real reason for why some people weren't affected and others died.
Well, the mist was snapping them. It was literally like just going around and snapping them.
Yes.
So the sickness was the mist preservation.
The people who
level of shock on people.
The people who died just were the people who couldn't handle that level of shock.
Then why weren't some people affected at all?
Because they didn't have.
Not everyone can snap.
Yeah.
And also, he chose a specific amount of people. Remember, even people that didn't have any sort of like noble bloodline could be snapped, because preservation is using the mist, can use the mist to actually implant some of his power into them and make it. He chose specifically to choose 16%.
Right, because the number
Doesn't matter
the
if
number
there's enough
16,
noble blood or there's not. He made that from the beginning. He made
Yeah.
that plan that we learn in Secret History from well before the Final Empire even exists, before nobility even exists. So he knows that he can use the mist to make someone a misting, noble or not,
Yeah.
and it'll then force them to snap. In fact, it doesn't affect nobles at
So
all.
the
So it's the number 16 though, is that he has to
Okay.
do. That's
Yeah.
why.
so the people who aren't affected are Allomancers already, or people who have 0 chance of becoming an Allomancer.
No. So the people who aren't affected are Allomancers already, people who have 0 chance of becoming an Allomancer, people who have already gone through significant enough trauma where they should have snapped but
Mhm.
didn't. So, like, that's why none of the noblemen get attacked by the mist, because when they were kids, they already went through that trauma to where they should have snapped, because that's part of being a nobleman. Yeah.
Trying to force mistings.
Yeah.
Like what happened
Snap.
to Ellen.
Yes. So they would have already snapped if they were able to.
Okay.
And feruchemists.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Is that why the Ska have a deep-seated fear of the mists?
yes.
Because of what
Yeah,
happened
Goes
No,
the
back
first
no.
time.
far.
The
Wow.
Ska have a deep-seated fear of the mist because they don't understand, and the mist rates scare them. They're all
Well,
superstitious.
it also comes from when the mist was, the deepness, and it was destroying the world.
There's probably an amount of that lingered around, like
Yeah.
because the poor people never truly understood what was going on, and so that
Yeah.
rumor of the mist probably just stuck around, and especially like the poor, the cities and civilization that was then easily conquered. Like they were just already knew mist stick around. It hurts people, it kills people, like it's all this crazy stuff, and then over 1,000 years, it just kind of morphed, and nobles were taught mists doesn't matter, so they were like taught in their upbringing, while everyone else didn't have any formal teaching to get that initial fear from 1,000 years ago off of them.
It's kind of like the fear of being at night, like being alone at night, and how even if you're in like a completely secured area, there are no people going to attack you, no animals, you're still going to be afraid of the dark.
Well, ish, yeah. But something that I want to mention, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I'm like 99% sure the mist was never actually the deepness. That was a false assumption that Vin made, because the mist are preservation's body. The deepness was always of ruin, or supposed to be ruin.
The mist was the deepness, but it was the mist pushed to the extreme by Ruin. Ruin took the mist and pushed it to the extreme of, oh, now you're out constantly, so nothing can survive the plant life. Also, now it's snapping people like crazy and it's causing all these deaths. So it's kind of like taking preservation's plan and corrupting it a bit. Okay, we should move on. Anything else for 15? I take it John is now looking at the copper mind.
I am. Because it doesn't sound right.
Okay, you get back to us. We're going to move on. Chapter 16. We've got Tensoon digging for information.
And we got the slip up from Tensoon.
Yeah, another slip up.
When he forgets that Rashik was the Lord Ruler.
Well,
Yeah.
when he forgets about the logbook, where he's like, "What is?" Like he doesn't know what thing she's working with.
Mhm.
The thing that she's messing with is.
He's like, "Oh yeah, I
Oh,
remember you briefly mentioned that."
yeah. I wanted to bring up the Fennec thing that she reads. And she reads like this 3-paragraph excerpt about the Mist Spirit, how it attacked Fennec, and he thought he was mad. I have right here the actual written thing, and it's barely a paragraph. The lake that Fennec discovered is below us now. I can see it from the ledge. It looks even more eerie from up here with its glassy, almost metallic sheen. I almost wish I had let him take a sample of its waters. Perhaps his interest is what angered the mist creature that follows us. Perhaps that is why it decided to attack it, stabbing him with its invisible knife. Strangely, the attack comforted me. At least I know that another has seen it. That means I am not mad. But Ruin has now changed it where it makes it seem like Alendi has to deal with all of this by himself and everybody's against him.
No, this is a different part of the logbook that Ben is talking about than that. This is a completely different part of the logbook. This is a later entry. This is after that entry.
But I think there's so much that lines up between what we got in the Final Empire epigraphs and that I think this is Ruin changing it. I think what I read from the Final Empire is the actual thing. I think what Vin's got in their hands right there is Ruin's alterations to it.
This is too different. This is too different from what you just read. This is a different entry than what you just read.
It does have a lot of similarities, though.
It has similarities, but I think it might be a different entry than the one that he's talking about, because it's too different.
Well, I think
Because-
Ruin's trying to make it so it reflects more upon Vin.
but
That's fine. That's
Ruin is changing. He's not going to change a big chunk of text like that. He'll change small things a little at a time.
maybe. I guess it just comes down to headcanon. I think this entire thing was changed. You can say that this is a different part of the logbook. That's perfectly fine. John, did
Unless
you find
we get
anything
like
about
a whole
Yes, you are
a
correct.
conclusive logbook, we'll never know. If we get like a front to back full version of it.
Yeah.
Which we'll
At least
probably
until
never
the movie has a plot one. And even I just found this out recently, the Indiana Jones diary from the Holy Grail, like that whole entire thing, it's like repeated 3 times or something. Like it's got 20 pages, but they do the same 20 pages 3 different times. Yeah.
John, what did you find out?
Yeah, he's correct. The mist was the deepness forced out by Ruin, causing the indirect destruction of everything, which is why Rashek moved the planet in the first place to burn off the mist during the day, which caused the other problems and the cascading saves that needed to happen. So, yeah. All right, I was wrong.
No problem. That's the whole point
Besides-
of this, is so that we can help clear things up.
Right.
Okay. 17?
Anything else for 16? Okay, you can take control of 17 since.
Well, because I do have a question about 17 specifically. Is that how does Finn not notice that Zane looks like Elend when they're standing right next to each other?
Because she's, I don't know, not that bright.
menacing.
Maybe it has to do with maybe Zane takes more after his mother, or maybe Ellen does. Which I would actually think Ellen takes after his mother in like the physical and emotional sense.
I
But-
mean, Vin talks about, like, Zane points out, like, hey, don't, like, the same eyes, the same kind of nose, the same slant of this, like, don't you see it?
Yeah. But also, like,
Later
maybe it
on.
has to do with Vin sees Ellen in a different light than Zane. Zane right now is her enemy. He is the Mistborn that has been here the entire time, and he works for Strath, whilst Ellen is the love of my life.
Yeah, and she does say that, like, when she first sees him, is like, oh, this just seems kind of familiar, but at the same time, like, when you don't expect it, I've been with my own siblings where people are like, oh, you two are twins, and then it's like, so is this your friend? No, he's also my brother. Oh, okay. Like, like me and my brother that's like 3 years apart, they're like, oh, you guys must be twins, because we were like exact same height, exact same stature. But then my other brother was just like so different. But at the same time, he had like people were like, "Oh no, you two are more similar," and this other one just like looks like the weird oddball out. So it's like it's really about perspective and where you're looking and stuff like that. So I like sometimes you're like, "Why didn't you see it?" But at the same time, if you're not looking for it, you're not gonna see it unless you're like artists. People like artists that are like, they like look at someone, they're like, that nose and that nose. They're exactly the same.
I do like
Zane's
Zane's
face.
comment. Sorry.
He's been locked in a permanent scowl for the past however old he is. It's changed his facial structure compared to Ellen.
I love Zane's comment how you, Ellen Ventura, are Strath's only son.
That was great. His precious only son.
Yeah, kind of that like jab at it a little bit. He's a little salty, but
I promote
He's
the new
so
hashtag,
jealous.
Strath.
Staff
Screw that guy.
Straff.
Stab Strath.
stab strap.
Screw that guy.
All right.
How about Straff 2024?
No.
No. I was keeping myself from doing a political joke earlier. I do not want to do it now. But anything else for chapter 17? Anything else for this as a whole?
I like these chapters a lot, and I like so far how like we're still dealing with Kelsier's legacy, and I like how Vin is kind of dealing with it in her own way, and how like Zane pushes a lot of those buttons that Kelsier used to push, and I like how Ellen is dealing with it by trying to live up to being the king that the people need, when during the Final Empire, a lot of this was kind of predicated on the idea that Kelsier would still be around to lead after they overthrew the Lord Ruler. So it's like they're each dealing with it in their own way. And the one thing I don't really like about this book so far is like they do have their moments, but I hate that they're keeping secrets from each other. It's driving me crazy.
Secrets in Kelsier's crew? No.
Yeah. So
this is definitely not a healthy marriage.
Next episode, we're going to be covering chapters 18 to 23. We've got. Does anybody have any dibs yet on any of those?
I will tomorrow.
Okay. Well, that's going to be what we cover in our next episode. So if you're reading along with us, be sure to stop there. And yeah. So that's going to be it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us in our ramblings and predictions. Please be sure to remember that there's always another connection. Have a nice night.
Marsh did not return.
Sounds good.
I think I figured out why there's no Ars Arcanum in Tress.
Why?
Why is that?
Because the book is not written from Chris's point of view. This was
Have
a
any
book
of them
from
been?
Hoyd. Well, that's a question, but Chris is always writing an after thing for it because it's a report to supposedly Silverlight. Plus, this one is a direct letter from Hoyd.
Interesting. We'll have to see if the other secret Cosmere secret novels have Ars Arcanums or not.
Indeed.
I certainly hope they do.
Me too.
It was much missed in that one.
What?
Yeah,
Especially
especially oh my god, 75 cents? Yes.
What?
Especially considered it introduced like a brand new system.
You lost me with the 75 cents.
Yeah.
A game that I've had on my wish list on Steam for quite some time is on sale for 75 cents.
Oh,
Shoot, that reminds me.
That makes
That
sense.
reminds me of one of mine did.
75 cents.
Mine dropped from $69 to $10.
Oh, that's awesome.
Giggity.
Sure.
Because we're in the spoiler section, right?
Yes.
So this episode, or this chapter ends with Vin being like, you know what? I am going to spar with that Zane guy again. And so, like, it's almost like, you know, maybe he's not that bad. Maybe he could be an ally. And then, like, literally, chapter 18, it's from Zane's POV, and it's the one where it's like, God told him to kill that guy.
Yeah. And immediately it's like, oh, I'm Ellen's half brother.